I'm Erin O'Riordan, and welcome back to Storytime with Erin O'Riordan. Today, we're going to read episode 11 of Cut by me and Tid Ellington. If you haven't already seen episode 10, please click the link, which you can find right here. Chapter 17, October 1999, Halloween. Diana inhaled loudly. Her stomach was so full she was beginning to regret that slice of pumpkin pie, and especially that second cup of coffee. Tim was so self-disciplined. He'd only had 1 cup of coffee, and he hadn't even put any cream in it. As they strolled around the quad, Diana began to feel a bit better. Maybe it was the unusually warm autumn air, scented with smoke from the bonfire and food from the vendors' stalls, along with the ubiquitous smell of aging leaves. Maybe it was Tim's hand holding hers. Diana smiled. Then again, maybe it was the music. As the band started up again, Diana and Tim looked toward the stage. There was a rock band, playing complete with a guitar, drums, bass, and a pretty blonde girl singing. Diana recognized the song vaguely. It was something she heard on the radio all the time. But she didn't remember the radio version having a violin in it. The band on stage had one with them, a violinist and a girl who looked as if her black clothes and black eyeliner were everyday wear and not a Halloween costume for her. Her long, uncombed black hair swung as she improvised along with the band. They watched the violinist for a moment, then Diana's full stomach reminded her she wanted to walk. "This is really a beautiful campus," she said, leaning close to Tim's ear. "I wonder what's on the other side of those dorms." She pointed south. "That's the main gates, the main road through campus," Tim said. "I used to work security on football weekends when I was a police officer. So you know your way around pretty well?" "Uh-huh." "You know," she said, "all of these people out here dancing, celebrating the pagan harvest ritual, really make me think about the circle of life. In the old days, a Halloween bonfire probably would have been accompanied by people dancing around naked, acting out some kind of ancient fertility rites. Are you saying this Halloween stuff is turning you on?" She nodded. "I don't suppose you know any quiet little spots where there wouldn't be so many people around, do you?" She drew her whole body closer to him, and he wrapped one arm around her. "I think I could find some place like that," he said. They started walking toward a big building just past the dorms, nearer the main gate. "I bet the library's pretty deserted tonight." "Good thinking," Diana said. Before they reached the library, Tim stopped in his tracks. Diana soon saw what he was seeing. Across the lawn, there was some commotion with a group of men in black robes. A woman in a purple robe and one of the men was sitting in the grass, with a couple of cops standing over them. Another one of the black-robed men was running away. Diana wondered why the police weren't chasing him. "I don't believe it," Tim said. "What, that they aren't chasing the other kid?" Tim shook his head. "No. The university administrators don't like to see their names in the paper. So when they hire the local police to work security, they make sure they know they're not really supposed to arrest anybody unless it's a very serious crime. I'm guessing they were talking to him and let him go anyway." "Oh, so what is it that you can't believe?" "I know both of those officers. One of them is Carl Johnson. He's one of the old vets who trained me. The other's my old partner, Darius McCaffrey. I wasn't expecting to see him here." Diana felt torn. The more she talked to Tim, the more she liked him. She was looking forward to getting him alone in some little corner of the library, and she sensed he was looking forward to it too. However, now that he looked like he wanted to go see Darius, Diana decided to be noble and postpone her library tryst. "Let's go talk to him," she said. "Really? Are you sure?" "Why not? Cops always have good stories, right? I bet he'll tell me a few things about you that you really don't want me to know." They both laughed. As they approached Darius, he and the other officer seemed to be delivering a lecture to the 2 robed figures on the ground. The other 3 had already run off. As Tim and Diana reached the quad, the police officers gave the remaining 2 permission to go. They headed for the cemetery, running at full speed. Diana was impressed that the woman could run so fast in thigh-high boots. "What was all that about?" Tim asked. Darius's face broke out in a wide smile. "Kawaguchi," he said, slapping Tim on the back. "What are you doing here?" "I couldn't stay away from the action," Tim said. "What did you catch them doing?" "Excuse me," a woman's voice said. Diana turned to look at her. She was in her late 40s, dressed in a gray cardigan and slacks, and looked very worried. "What happened to my son?" "I'll handle this," the other officer said. He went off to explain to the obviously distressed mother that her son had run away of his own volition, refusing medical help. She didn't seem very convinced, but Diana only half listened to their conversation. She tried to focus on Tim and Darius. "Don't mind if you're practicing witchcraft or whatever, as long as you're not drinking a beer on campus," Darius said. "We let both of them go with a warning. So who's this?" Diana held out her hand for him to shake. "Diana Bell," she said, "law-abiding citizen. Tim and I are on our second date tonight." "Nice," Darius said, giving Tim a thumbs up that he thought Diana couldn't see. She noticed the wedding ring on Darius's finger. "That is, it's nice to meet you, ma'am. My name's Darius McCaffrey." "Pleased to meet you, Officer McCaffrey." "It's Sergeant McCaffrey, ma'am." "Really?" Tim asked. Diana could tell he was really surprised by the way his eyebrows arched. "You passed the sergeant's exam?" "Just barely," Darius said dryly. "And they actually let you supervise people?" "Yup," Darius answered. "There's a whole lot of shit I don't have to put up with anymore." He glanced reflectively at Tim's arm. "Look, Tim, I know I've been an ass. After everything you and I have been through, I know I don't call you as often as I should. It's been too long since we talked. We have to get together sometime." "Sure," Tim agreed. "I've got your number. I'll give you a call." "Maybe you and Diana could come out with me and Renata," Darius suggested. "How is Renata, anyway?" Darius frowned. "Same as always." "Are you guys still trying to have kids, then?" "Yeah," he said quickly. And then, changing the subject, "What have you been doing lately? Are you still into the yoga thing?" "Yeah, I'm still a yoga instructor." Darius shook his head. "I can't believe it sometimes, Kawaguchi. You were a good cop, man." "Thanks. That means a lot. If that punk hadn't screwed up your arm, you'd still be out there on the street with me." He kept shaking his head. "I don't know," Tim said. "Even if I didn't have the nerve damage, I don't know if I could go back to it. It's not that I'm scared, it's just that, I don't know. Besides, I tried teaching myself to shoot left-handed. No go." Darius and Diana exchanged looks. "Hey," said Darius, "did he ever tell you about that call we went on down on Waterfront Street? The two, what do you call them? Drag queens or transsexuals or something? Anyway, they were fighting in the middle of the street, down there by the duck pond where the road gets close to the river. It's a big fucking mess. Oh, excuse me, miss." "It's okay," Diana said. "I've heard worse." "So anyway, it's a big damn mess. Blood, red lipstick, and fake hair all over the place. So Tim gets one of them off the other and starts cuffing him or her or whatever. All of a sudden, Tim feels this hand on his..." Darius kept talking, but Tim couldn't hear him. He was thinking about Magdalena Rodriguez. That was the name of the woman who'd been killed in the gas station that night. Magdalena was 19 years old when she died. Now she would have been 21 and probably still being beaten up by her boyfriend. Tim thought about her often as he tried to fall asleep at night. He would always wonder if Darius had done something noble that night by killing Magdalena's boyfriend. He sometimes wondered if, in a perverse way, death was still the best thing that ever happened to that kid. Tim heard Diana laughing at Darius's story. He shook himself. The sound of her laughter reminded him of something else, something far more pleasant. "Darius," he said, "I'll give you a call. Please excuse us." Diana caught a glimpse of the look on Tim's face. "We're heading for the library," she told Darius apologetically. Then again, she wasn't really sorry. "It was nice to meet you." As they walked away, Tim said, "All this time I thought Halloween was just an excuse for kids to get candy and rot their teeth." Nancy Hawkins sat down on the tailgate, supported by Harold's hand on her back. The police officers had already told her everything they knew and walked away. She looked up at Edward. She was vaguely aware that what they were saying and doing was being recorded. She'd seen the local news van off in the parking lot. Of course, the reporters and camera operators had come circling at the first sign of action from the police officers. Some of the reporters had tried to talk to Nancy directly. They'd been shooed away by the combined efforts of the police and Harold. "How are you feeling?" Harold asked, rubbing his wife's back comfortingly. She answered with uncharacteristic forcefulness. "How do you think I'm feeling?" she snapped. "I just found out that our son is a member of a satanic cult. Then one of the cult members attacked him and he ran off. He's hurt, and I don't know where he is, And those police officers won't go look for him. How exactly should I feel, Harold? He didn't seem to have been hurt very badly, Edward said gently. The young lady who punched him looked rather small to me. Edward walked around the tailgate and stood beside Harold. Barbara Jean and I were never blessed with any children, he said. I can only imagine what you must be going through right now, but I assure you, although things look bad for Dennis right now, he's not lost forever. You raised him to know right from wrong. If he has any kind of a conscience, it has to be eating him up inside that he's made the wrong choice. You'll have him back soon enough, Mr. and Mrs. Hawkins. I can't believe someone you really love could walk away and leave you forever. Nancy nodded. I'm sure you're right, Pastor, she said. He's always been a good boy, or he was until we gave him that car. I don't believe it. Those friends of his. She broke down sobbing. Nearby, Mrs. Young shook her head. She was alone. Isaac Young had taken the girls home and put them to bed. It can't be that easy, can it, Pastor? What do you mean, Tracy? Edward asked. Tracy Young was a small woman in her 30s, with straight dust brown hair and big green eyes. When she sang, she sounded like an angel. Edward only had to hear her sing once to know he wanted to hire her as the church's choir director. Afterward, he had been surprised by the depth of her faith. In many ways, Tracy Young was a very practical woman. Her devotion to Jesus Christ came out at unexpected times. That Hawkins boy has been visited by demons, she said. We all heard the girl call them down. They certainly got into her, and they must have gotten into that Hawkins boy as well. She stared at Nancy. Her large green eyes grew wider. Surely we can't expect the boy to come back to the Lord merely through the force of his own conscience. If he's possessed, he won't have a conscience any more. Nancy sobbed loudly. Edward reached out and stroked the top of her head. It's all right, he said. I'm confident you'll go home and find Dennis safe in his own bed. The three of you will have a nice talk in the morning. Mrs. Young seemed offended. But, Pastor, she said, there are satanic forces at work here. Edward looked back over his shoulder. He saw the lights of a television camera. Mrs. Young, do you remember the talk I gave to the boys at the coffee shop? But she wasn't listening. You do believe in the devil, don't you, Pastor? She asked, pointing a finger at his chest. Edward glanced nervously back at the camera, then down at Mrs. Young. I simply know, he said, that there is a difference between the work of the devil and the work of some teenagers who've had a few beers and think it would be a kick to cause trouble at a public function such as this. He laughed nervously. We all did things like this when we were children, and we all came to our senses with a little bit of self-reflection. Mrs. Young was appalled. I never participated in witchcraft when I was a teenager, she said. Did you, Pastor? Of course not, Edward said. Now, let's not upset the Hawkinses any more. Do you feel like driving, Harold, or should I have one of the boys drive you home? I think I'll be all right, Pastor, Harold Hawkins said. He turned to his wife. Dennis will be fine, too. I'm sure he will, Nancy said weakly. Mrs. Young harumphed. Harold Hawkins helped his wife into the passenger seat of his truck. As the Hawkinses walked away, Edward heard Chris Peterson say quietly, Grace. What's that? Mrs. Young asked, bringing her face in close to Chris's. Grace, he repeated, like the pastor said at the restaurant. Grace means that God loves us even though we don't deserve it. Even if we've done some things that really piss him off, like Dennis Hawkins did. He isn't lost, you know, because of God's grace. Edward smiled at the young man. That's right, he said. Surely you believe in God's grace, Mrs. Young. Mrs. Young harumphed again. She backed away from Chris, muttering something about how grace is not an excuse for young people to be running around calling out the names of demons, as she disappeared into the crowd. Grace, Edward said quietly, so that the members of the congregation who were nearest him could hear, is proof that God loves us. He repeated the words over and over. They became a mantra. He needed to believe in grace. Only God could forgive him for what he'd done to Barbara Jean and for what he'd done to himself. Brigid made her way through a crowd of evangelical Christians. She saw Edward in the middle of a group of young men but his skinny wife was nowhere to be seen. For a brief moment their eyes met. As she watched his lips move, she could have sworn he was saying, "I love you." He was saying it over and over. The message was intended for her. She knew it was, but she didn't care. She walked away toward the sound of the violin, hoping Fred was almost done playing and that it was time to meet the mysterious Ava Hirsch. Brigid's body shivered. She wished she had another piece of candy or a Coke or anything, but mostly she wished for the night to end in the warm rush waiting for her at the end of a needle. When the music stopped, Brigid met Fred at the grotto. She found her kneeling before the statue of St. Helena, praying. "Where's Ava?" Brigid said. Her fingers were shaking uncontrollably. She couldn't wait much longer. "Did you meet up with her already?" "No," Fred said, rising from her knees. "I saw Leander with this chick Starla over by the student center. They said Ava and her boyfriend Kurt left already. I guess the cops busted up their satanic ritual and Ava was pissed." She laughed. Brigid knew Fred was both offended by and scared of Leander's Satanist friends. "Could you give me a ride to Keaton's then?" Brigid said. "We can still get something from Dean." Fred nodded. "You were awesome, by the way," Brigid added. "I like that oral fixation song you guys did. Did you write that?" "Not the words," Fred said. "Still," Brigid said. She took Fred's hand in hers, and they walked to Fred's car. You've been listening to episode 11 of Cut by Erin O'Riordan and Tid Ellington. Please give us a comment and let us know how you've been liking the story so far. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. When episode 12 is ready, you can reach episode 12 by clicking on the link right here. Thanks for listening and have a great day.